Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare.
All right. Well, I'm going to try to do this without glasses. I've had cataract surgery. I had one on Monday. I had one 2 weeks ago. Left eye's 20/20. So I'm kind of working with it. We'll see how we do. Uh, all right. So last week we had, I think, a rich discussion around the two main categories of meditation: concentration, the shamatha, and the insight, the analytical type meditations. And good discussion around how we can incorporate both, and the foundation of shamatha, the meditation we just did, and how essential it is really to progress in the path. An untrained mind, not a good place to be. So really this foundational aspect of always, no matter what you do, taking some time to have a rich session where you're just learning to have more attention, more presence of mind, some concentration, some ability to, as they say, not lose the object, right? The object's the breath. You may have lost it a little bit in there, could have been. And then you go, okay. So we just come back. And again, for me, I think it's so important to always remind people they get caught up in that type of meditation and they think the whole point is, I need to be on the breath. And if I'm not on the breath, I'm not doing it right. And we judge a meditation, we evaluate our meditation by, did you follow the directions? Did they nail it? Did I sit properly with a nice, straight back, tongue touching roof of my mouth? And did I sit for the time I said, I sat for? And when my mind wandered and I noticed that, and I then let go and come back, I did that, nailed it, 10. And what's happening is two things. One is, I'm getting a little better at staying on the object, but I'm noticing when my mind's not. And that's when I become mindful. When I notice my mind has wandered, I just became mindful. I know where my mind is now. And what is so hard to realize sometimes is how unaware we are during the day. And if I'm on the breath and then I notice, I don't know why, as soon as I went out there, I was thinking cherry pie, just saying. Okay, so now I'm thinking about cherry pie. The moment I noticed cherry pie, that's what I'm thinking about. I just became mindful. That's a success. I know where my mind is. I'm mindful now. But what happens is I don't remember leaving the breath. So I'm on the breath and I notice cherry pies on my mind. That's all unawareness in between. It's a scary place to live. And that's where we'll spend a lot of our life. So this meditation's reducing unawareness. So right off the bat, we're doing something really well. We're reducing unawareness. We're noticing our minds not on the breath more often. We're becoming mindful more often. So on one level, we're developing more stability, but we're also becoming more mindful and we're reducing unawareness. So when I understand that, then, I have 1,000 mindful moments. That's great. That's great. Whereas a lot of people think, well, I had a bad meditation session because, I had 1,000 mindful moments. And it's not like that at all. It's okay. And then, what you will notice is, sometimes you have a very busy mind, sometimes not so busy mind. But if you keep doing that day in and day out, you're going to become more aware more often during the day. You're going to notice your mind is wandering. You go, oh, you might not have to say, what were we talking about? where did I put those glasses that are on my head? Never done that one. I have. And so you're going to be more present, more aware, more mindful. And so that's the deal is we don't get caught up in micromanaging a singular session other than did I follow directions. If you want to evaluate your meditation practice, well, then do it every day for 3 months. And how you do at the end of 3 months? Are you more mindful? Are you less reactive? Are you calmer? Are you more present? Well, then it's working. So we had a good talk about that last week where, some people have been doing this a while, but, they haven't dropped into that zone. And then we talked about, well, if you go away for a weekend retreat or, a few days retreat, you've been doing this for a while and you've got this nice conducive environment, you may find that happen, unless you really want it to happen, in which case it probably won't happen. Because now, it's just about letting go, it's just about letting go. So I think a good discussion, and then the analytical meditations, and that's where we're probing, and so the combination of shamatha concentration and vipassana insight, that union is really how the Buddha, became enlightened. It's his big discovery. So having said that, there's a few other types of meditation, but before I move on, just want to check in. Anyone have any thoughts or questions before we get into some other types that I'll talk about? Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't have the speaker muted. Did that last time. Anybody have any questions? Can't hear me. Okay. All right. Well, let's get into the text then. So the initial way about talking about these types of meditation was these two broad categories, concentration and analytical. Now we're at the bottom of this page. Another way of discussing meditation is meditation on an object and meditation to transform our subjective experience. In meditation on an object, the object's whatever it is we're focused on, we work to apprehend the particular object, like to really apprehend it, to understand it, to have some realization around it. Impermanence or emptiness, for example. So when we're talking about objects, it doesn't have to be a rock or an image. The object is what we're focused on. So impermanence or emptiness. For example, that we haven't previously apprehended. So most of us haven't previously apprehended some of the more subtle things of impermanence or emptiness. Investigating that object with wisdom, we cultivate a correct ascertainment of it, and then familiarize ourselves with that. The mind meditating on impermanence first focuses on a particular thing, such as the body, and then develops an understanding of its attribute of impermanence, the body's momentarily changing nature, which we haven't previously realized. Right? We kind of feel about the same as yesterday, but there's a whole lot of things that change. So once we've kind of got that, we didn't really realize, day to day, there's a lot of change going on. The meditating mind realizes the body's impermanence, and impermanence becomes that mind's apprehended object. And it's not a philosophical idea. It's not I get that. You and I can talk about, I kind of get the body's changing every moment to moment. But to really have an apprehension of impermanence, that there's nothing about your body that's the same as a moment ago. I mean, that's a whole different level. And really recognizing that even my perception of me, and what I know and all of that is in a constant state of motion, of movement. There's no solid you there. which is kind of weird. Kind of feels like. Right? So that's not something we're going to really notice unless we really get into probing, sitting with. And then at some point, once it's apprehended, then the idea is to sit with that apprehension, let it soak in. So we hear a teaching, we analyze the teaching, then we meditate. Then that meditation becomes just this like really letting it soak in. The meditation on emptiness is similar. Emptiness is an object we haven't perceived previously. And the meditating mind endeavors to understand and then see it more clearly. First, we obtain a rough idea of the lack of inherent existence. Then we apprehend it was a correct inferential cognizer, a knowing. Finally, remove the veil of conceptual appearance. Finally, we remove the veil of conceptual appearance and cognize emptiness directly. So it's this process of unraveling and sitting with it. So something like that, for example, we would take up for a while. It's not like, okay, I'm going to have a session and realize emptiness. It's more I'm going to sit with this. I'm going to do it again and again. And remembering meditation is to become familiar with something, to become familiar with. So we become familiar with something by bringing it to mind again and again and again and knowing. So we're cultivating this familiarity. So we might do it with, things like impermanence, might do it with emptiness, like 2 examples. And then there's going to be this other way that we can use an object, but in a different way that he'll bring up next here, which I think is the way that most of us, I think, is a good starting point. I have to wait till my little screen changes here. Sorry. Put that down. Okay. In meditation to transform our subjective experience, we mold the mind into a particular subjective experience. So this is where we're actually working with our transforming the mind. We mold the mind into a particular subjective experience. Compassion is not a separate object that we try to ascertain, as in meditation on an object. Rather, we want to transform our mind into the subjective experience of compassion. To do this, we contemplate sentient beings' kindness and their dukkha, right? Dukkha is that unsatisfactoriness of samsara, that stress, or often just called suffering. We contemplate their kindness, their suffering. A wish for them to be free from dukkha and its causes arises within us. Okay, so now we've got compassion arising. Whereas our subjective mental experience becomes compassion. Through familiarization with this experience over time, our compassion gains strength. Until eventually it arises naturally whenever we see a sentient being. To cultivate faith, fortitude, and love, we similarly meditate to transform our subjective experience. When meditating on compassion, the object of putting my words backwards here. I can see pretty good though. This is just my mind racing ahead. It's not my eyes. When meditating on compassion, the observed object of our meditation is sentient beings who experience any of the 3 types of dukkha. So a reminder that 3 types of suffering. Suffering of suffering, we all suffer pain. Suffering of change, something that was fun now is not so fun, or things change and we lose it. and then the suffering of suffering that's very pervasive, underlying dissatisfaction. So the aspect is the wish to free them from this dukkha. Compassion does not apprehend freedom from suffering. It is an aspiration and a heart transforming experience. So you can see the difference there, to really try to understand something versus really changing my experience, really transforming my mind. And then over time, that just becomes the way it happens. I just see a sentient being and compassion arises. And at that level, that's any sentient being. It could be someone who looks, quite comfortable, but we know they're in samsara. We know they're in a prison. We know that they're conditioned. And so it can arise at that level. And again, compassion, a lot of people think, if you're compassionate all the time, you're going to suffer a lot, right? But it's the other way around. Suffering triggers compassion. Compassion doesn't trigger suffering. It's the other way around. And so with compassion, you're really empowered. You have an energy. You just want things to be good for people. It's such a force of energy. It's amazing. Wish I had some. I mean, it really gets you going. Some of the teachers I've had, some of the monks I've lived with, it's just, wow, they need very little, and their joy is just, it's just joyful. There's just so much joy in that. So, compassion is not gonna make you sad. It's sadness that brings some compassion. And then there's an energy to do something about it, a really rich state of mind. So yeah, that's the opposite of compassion fatigue. That it just doesn't work that way.
Well, isn't that wanting them to be different than what they are?
Wanting their experience, yeah, to be different than they are, yeah. No, we don't want to get attached to thinking they should be different than they are. That's a different state of mind. I think Jimmy over there should be different. Okay, well, there's a lot of suffering and reification, but not wanting Jimmy to suffer. There's not much pain there. I'm suffering because I want Jimmy to be different, make me happy. You see the difference? Yeah. That Jimmy, yeah.
So if Jimmy doesn't suffer, or if Jimmy suffers, you're not attached to either outcome.
Now, the attachment's going to be an issue. Attachment is always afflicted. So, in case you didn't hear that line, the point being made. So, if Jimmy's suffering or not suffering, you're not going to be attached either way, right? So,
If we want Jimmy not to suffer, that sounds like kind of a paradox, because then
there's a difference between attachment and desire. There's a difference between attachment and aspiration. Attachment is I'm really attached to an outcome, right? And I think, it needs to be a certain way. Really, that's going to change things. Whereas a desire, I don't need to be attached to an outcome. I can work all day to make something happen, whether it works this way or that way. That's powers greater than me at work, that I understand that Jimmy's karma is playing out in his own way. And whether it goes this way or that way, I'm not attached to that outcome. But that doesn't mean I won't work fearlessly even to help him to do my part, whatever I can. But attachment's going to be it's sticky. You see the difference there? It's subtle.
it's subtle, yeah.
Yeah. So that's where people get in the sense of, can you be that motivated to make a difference if you're not attached to an outcome? And Buddha said, absolutely, see all this suffering, and I have a desire, but the attachment to the outcome is going to ruin the whole process, actually. And so that's, earlier we were talking about, if there isn't suffering, there's not maybe a movement towards, not suffering for learning. And that's initially how it works. But at some point, when you have a grasp, like an apprehension, apprehending as they're put here, around the nature of dukkha, the nature of suffering, that's underpinning all of this. I mean, you're really motivated to help people because they're not separate than you in any way, and they're actually contributing to everything that you have in your life, and the very nature. Like it's just, of course you'd help. Like there's nothing more important, and you're motivated out of this deeper knowing rather than an afflictive attachment that we might get with, I don't want my grandkid to suffer. But when I see everyone is caught in the same prison, and it's just wow, how can I be helpful? It's just naturally, and so there's bodhicitta has this energy around that, but it also has wisdom, which some people might need to suffer, right? They might need to go through their lessons, or they might be a Buddha teaching you a lesson, which is always an interesting thing to tap into. Don't know if that contractor driving you nuts might be a Buddha giving us a lesson. Showing me my mind. Very helpful. Right, as Kurt or Keith had a hand up there.
Hey, John. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to ask about, you talked about how judging, or that's not the right word, examining a meditation in the other way, when you're focused in the first two ways we talked about. Does it work the same in these last meditations where if I'm working on, or do I have to attain meditative quiescence before I can work on these type of meditations that you've just been talking about?
No, you do not need to attain meditative quiescence. As a matter of fact,
that's good.
I second that.
Yeah.
That's all I need to know.
His Holiness is going to, suggest that we actually do these types of meditations, and yeah, it's coming up in the text. The particularly the Gaelic lineage of which I have most of my training. Well, that's this whole Lama stages of the path to awakening is you're going to spend some time on each of these topics. You'll spend time on a rare and precious life, and what that really means, to really get a taste of it. You'll meditate on impermanence, and you'll get a taste of it. You'll meditate, so you get these deeper realizations of these teachings. And so each topic, you get the teaching, you analyze the teaching, you meditate on the teaching. And so you might work with a topic for a week or a month, and continue your shamatha practice as well. Yeah. So it's really very much that way, because, not that this ever happens to any of you, I'm sure, but sometimes you might receive a teaching and you might forget it next week. You might even come to a Dharma teaching, not remember what we talked about last week. I'm sure that I've heard that happens to some people. But if you go, okay, let me take this, let me now go contemplate it, think about it. It's like, I notice you come in, you've been thinking about it, right? You have a question. And, I've been thinking about this. Then, now we're getting somewhere with it, it's juicy. And then we kind of, with our meditation, we just kind of bring it to mind, analyze it, attack it, see if it holds up.
So when we start thinking about cherry pie in the middle of it, then we just bring ourselves back to what we're contemplating.
Yes, after you have a piece. Right, after the trip to the store. In the middle of the night, because you know that it came up in your meditation, so it's got to be a sign.
Right, it's a sign.
It's a sign.
Yeah, this needs to happen. Yeah.
John, while our Hollywood Square is open here, are there any guided meditations around these topics?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, Venerable Thubten Chodron has a whole series of guided meditations on the Lama Rim, and even a script. And I think I have the scripts available as well. And so we'll take you through each topic, and then there's the standard ones, like 9-point meditation on death. It's everyone's favorite. Popular one. And so as we get, so here, they're preparing, and then, in the Lama Rim, there's going to be for each, impermanence, rare impression, meditation specifically, through each point that'll be available. Yeah. And so that's technically a training that we would do. And just spending no rush, just really settling into those. All right, well, let me pop this up. Okay. Another type of meditation involves visualization. So now another style of meditation. For example, imagining, is that what it is? Imagining? Yeah. A Buddhist deity and its mandala, its environment. Imagining being and acting like a Buddha encourages us to create the causes to become one. So Tibetan Buddhism has these very rich visualizations where you visualize, the Buddha in mandalas, we get empowerments. You become self-generating. And then the idea is, for example, if you've had the empowerment for Buddha of compassion, and in the morning, you do your practice, and then you get into emptiness, you generate, you see yourself as the Buddha of compassion. You're probably not going to be such a jerk during the day, as you're walking around, right? So you're going to be having these qualities within you. You're cultivating. It's a little bit artificial, but in a really good way. And so it ripens the mind in that way, because ultimately, your nature underneath the human nature is Buddha nature. So it's already there. It's just we don't realize it. That's the only difference between a Buddha and us is they know. It's really it. So in those, it's a skillful method where people will do that and then train, and then it ripens that mind in a way. Meditation sessions enable you to deepen your understanding and intensify your concentration on the meditation object. All right, so now it's just saying the where you started. We're getting the ability to concentrate, and we're getting the ability to deepen and understand our familiarity and our understanding. In break times, when eating, walking, or engaging in daily life activities, like eating cherry pie, you do not forget the meditation topics. With a corner of your mind, recall what you meditated on. You may wish to choose one Lama Rim topic each day, meditate on it in the morning, and view your experiences that day through the lens of that topic. One day, dwell on precious human life, investigate it during your meditation sessions, and be aware of your fortune and opportunity it provides during the day. The next day, focus on death and impermanence. And as you go about your daily activities, recall that you and the people in your environment around you are transient. In this way, avoid becoming attached to anything. The following day, focus on refuge and so on, cycling through the Lama topics. In this way, integrate the meaning of each Lama topic into your life day by day. And he's also going to point out, you may prefer to focus on one Lama topic for a week or even a month before going on to the next. This enables you to go more deeply into each one. Alternatively, focus on the topic that seems most appropriate to help subdue the afflictions likely to rise that day, tailoring your practice to your needs each day. So that's that's also quite good. In a previous teaching, when we talked about our mental afflictions, we have more than one often. But it's like, pick the most dominant one, and let's just work on that. And so there might be a Lama topic that will really work with that quite well. And so that might be the more relevant instead of just going in order. Like, here's my big issue. Let me work on that. Now, I read something in there that may have struck people a little different, that if we meditate on impermanence and death and transient nature of people, and then we're not attached. So that might, again, seem like you don't care, but it's quite the opposite. Attachment actually prevents you from really deeply loving and caring. So it's not detached, it's non-attached. In other words, at some point you start recognizing that you can love and care about everyone you meet like you would your grandchild. That kind of love. It takes a while to get there. And don't hit me up for allowance. You're not getting it. But that ripens. And so when they're talking about not being attached, they're not saying that you don't care. You care at a deep level. And but attachment is always a technical term. It's an afflicted state that I really need something to be this way, or I want something this way. There's a exaggerated quality to it. There's a sort of a self-centered thing that if this happens, I'm going to be okay. So whereas it's like in a relationship with another human being or a partnership or marriage, attachment is, I'm kind of attached to you being a particular way that I like and it makes me feel good. And when you're not that way, I don't really love you that much, Whereas if I love someone, I'm really not, I want the best for them and for the relationship. And I'm not going to be so attached to them being this way or that way, but rather, what's the healthiest way? What's the most, loving way that we can be with each other? There's a great quote, love never hurts, attachment does. And it's that kind of love that we can develop. But attachment gets in the way. So, so when you hear that, don't be attached. It's not, I don't care. It's like, really, let's care deeply in the most profound, meaningful way that we can.
It's basically an unconditional love. Right?
It would be like unconditional love, yeah. And it's at its most, ripened way. Yeah. I think we're going to finish this section. This could happen. Oh, that's it. Just a couple more. So they're talking about in between sessions now, right? Things that we do. And so regularly reading texts about your meditation topic, discussing with Dharma friends are also helpful. This is like keeping a fire's embers glowing overnight so that the fire's easy to start the next morning. Similarly, cultivating mindfulness of a Lama topic during break times invigorates and intensifies our meditation sessions and aids our mental development. In this way, gradually develop your mind. I often advise my friends, including those doing long retreats, not to expect spiritual development to occur in only a few years. The key is to make effort daily so that over time, gradual change occurs. We progress toward our long-term goal of Buddhahood day by day. And so, that's pretty solid advice if our only Dharma experience is at the Dharma teaching or during the meditation. But, are there, people we can talk to or read or keep a quote, available? It's kind of nice. Sometimes you have like a little quote, maybe on a desk or someplace you see. You bring to mind. I had a friend used to tape one to the steering wheel because they would travel from job site to job site. It was right there. They'd take a minute before they started their car. Little things like that to just remind ourselves, because we'll get caught up in our day and forget these teachings. So when we're not in meditation, little things that we can do, little reminders or taking a few moments. I know that some people here will listen to like a podcast or a teaching if they have a long drive, things like that. Those are all very helpful to keep the embers glowing. Okay, well, any thoughts or questions there? We're coming to this little portion of the text on meditation. This is when I look for Carla. She's not here tonight. She's always the one who starts it.
I was wondering if you could clarify the difference between what we went over tonight, chiefly looking into topics with analytical meditation, because they seem the same.
Yeah. So for those of you online, we said, how would you know? I haven't even talked yet. What was brought up was the two categories of analytical and concentration. And so these types would be fitting in that realm of analytical. Yeah. And then there's this big, very different genres, right? Where we could be, it doesn't seem analytical to change your mind, right, to compassion, right? But yet to get to that mind, you have to kind of think about the suffering of others, think about those things. So you're bringing that contemplative aspect to it. And then you're getting compassion, right? So you're still going through that. So you're using that insight or that probing to get an understanding that will either change me subjectively or apprehend the object better. So they fit in that genre of analytical. He was just saying other ways of looking at it. Yeah. That's why, I used to, wonder, like loving kindness is Vipassana insight meditation. How's that insight? But you have to do all the insight to have that loving kindness arise, to care. You say, oh, yeah.
John, I could use some further clarification because even in that review question and through the reading, like the difference between meditating on an object and then I didn't quite get the end of the question, and transform in meditation to transform our subjective experience. I know you're talking all about that. Can you clarify it a little more?
Sure. So I popped it back up on the screen. So at the end of each section, there's these little reflections for us to think about. So he brought up the first one there. That actually made a second. So review the meaning of meditation on object and meditation to transform our subjective experience. Make examples of each. So the ones that he used for an object is it's a deep insight to apprehend, to have a direct realization about that object. Whereas changing our subjective, that experience, we're not trying to know compassion, we're trying to have compassion. And so it doesn't apprehend. For example, he made the point, compassion doesn't apprehend an absence of suffering. It is a state of wanting to remove suffering. And so in one, think of it as meditating to attain a mind of compassion or a mind of loving kindness. You're developing that within you, that subjective quality. The other is more direct wisdom, apprehending, understanding. I'm not trying to change my subjective state. I'm trying to gain a realization about this object I'm focusing on. Is that helpful?
That helps, but I
There's
still
no but after that. It either helps,
I'm
either
on-
helps or it doesn't. Okay.
I'm on my own. That did help, and there's some more.
And
And so what would I get what a object meditation looks like? What is that? Because it's asking the question, an example of each type of meditation. So what's a subjective meditation?
well, he used compassion, right? So you'd like to develop more compassion. You'd like to have a compassionate mind. You'd like to, for example, have compassion arise spontaneously, right? That would be one of changing that subjective. I'm trying to think of the exact word to use, but so that's where you're really wanting to alter your mind ultimately. That makes sense?
I think so. Yeah.
So one's wisdom, understanding, the other is more subjective experience.
Yeah, that helps. I get that. Yeah.
Okay. So compassion is not wisdom, right?
Right.
Compassion is a way of being. But of course, it takes wisdom to have that level of compassion. So you're going to always have a little overlap in that sense.
So that first, can you back to that question, language?
Absolutely. Oops, yeah. The meaning of meditation on object and meditation transform a
So
subjective.
the meaning of a meditation on an object, so that would be more, that means that there is some objective characteristic to that object, whereas the second one is subjective.
Right. It's tricky when you use the word objective, but yeah.
Subjective.
But let's just use object versus subjective. Yeah. Yeah. So the object generally, and yeah, objective is a tricky word in Buddhism. But I get what you're saying. Yeah. In a conventional way, objective in a sense. But as you probe its nature, you're not going to find any finite qualities about it and or attributes. But yeah, it'd be
So they're objective, sort of subjective attributes.
everything you experience is subjective.
But I thought the first part was so the object, you're going on the subjective characteristics of the object.
Yeah. So you want to know it as you want to realize it. You want it to be almost free of subjective things, right? So basically how we observe anything is going to have a lot to do with that which is cognizing me. Again, all of you are seeing a different John, right? So to know me, to focus on the attributes of John, you're all going to be starting in a different way. It's all going to always going to be subjective, always limited to the tools of measurement and all of that. So technically there's no objective world out there. Uh, cats can experience things different than I do, and you're going to experience things different. And some people think Brussels sprouts are delicious, some people don't. So there's just all that. So don't want to get caught up in the minutia of that. The point of it is, I'm going to meditate so I understand this as deeply as I can. So one's just understanding something as deeply as you can. And the other is literally changing sort of your mental, emotional experience. Right? So arising compassion. Whereas understanding this as deeply as I can. Impermanence, is if you go it, you're going to add a little more, and a little more, and a little more, and you're going to know it more. And at some point, a direct realization would no longer be very subjective, right? It would just be more as it is, bare, without all my conditioned walls. It could break through that, in which case it wouldn't be very subjective. It's knowing.
That makes sense.
My God, I figure if I talk long enough, I might.
I think.
You're rooting for me there.
Moment sensibility.
Right, Jeff.
Hey, John. So the question I have with the objective and subjective. So, like if I'm looking
at getting off that, man. Okay.
I'm sorry. I just kind of want.
I thought you liked me, man. I thought we were friends.
We are, man. But I'm at. So as far as like objective, like if I'm doing a love and kindness meditation, right, and I'm calling somebody to mind, right, and I'm using them as like an objective, when I'm
an object,
right.
Okay.
When I'm able to use that and bring that to mind as loving kindness and offer that, it kind of, I've noticed in my experience is as I do that and have done that, it has tended and led to softening of my heart, right? Like being able to let go of a lot of anger and cultivate some loving kindness, right? So using that imagery as the objective, like the subject, I feel has been, developing the loving kindness and softening of the heart.
Right. And so that's the process. The process is but you're not really using them as an object to understand them.
Right.
You're bringing them to mind to recognize their suffering, have a realization about that, have compassion arise or loving kindness arise. And so you're using those reflective, contemplative, bringing to mind of that person, of the suffering and so forth, to transform your mind, but not to apprehend the very nature of the person you're thinking about. Right? You just don't want to be so mad at them anymore.
Well, yeah, no, kind of I guess.
Or have this loving kindness arise around that.
Words are challenging at the moment, but yeah, I'm like not bringing them to mind to figure them out, but using that as a way of cultivating the love within myself.
Right, exactly. So that would be, transforming the subjective experience. That's the way you do it.
Right.
And you're doing it well, it sounds like.
Thank you.
Got a good. Thank you. So in this way, if we can think about just sort of one way is cultivating understanding, wisdom, and another is developing the heart, basically. How am I developing the heart? And that wisdom is going to help us develop the heart. And developing the heart is going to create the conditions for a greater degree of wisdom. And to put it all into perspective, the union of compassion and wisdom is how we become enlightened. So they're having you work on both. They're having you work on both. The two accumulations. That's the path of Buddhahood. And so a bunch of just focus on wisdom. You've got no fertilizer. It's like pouring water on a raft. You can just go after the very nature of experience. Be pretty tight. But if you have softened that heart and developed the loving kindness that's been talked about, the compassion, the care, the seeing others, that's this rich fertilizer from which then meditation on wisdom yields amazing results. And so they really work together. And so then the big question becomes, okay, now I got which meditation am I doing now? And so as we talked about last week, and I know some of you do that the daily morning, you're really working on both right there, right? We cover rare and precious human birth. We think about this, and then we think about the others, and then we want to benefit them. We soften the heart, and there's a nice stretch of just shamatha, and then there's an intention, a motivation to engage in this day, kindly. With wisdom and compassion. So you're setting a nice tone. So it's kind of putting them all right in that nice way to start the day. And then we didn't even get into like a meditation on purification. At the end of the day, Vajrasattva practice, where you can, again, bring to mind anything that you did that you don't feel good about. And we can bring that to mind, see how it's harmed ourselves or others, get a realization, and develop an intelligent regret for that. Now we're purifying that, and then engaging in a fierce commitment to avoid that as best we can in the future. And it's really a lot like Catholic confession, essentially, except they're diving more deeply and understanding why I did it. Where is the affliction coming from, and then this intelligent regret comes up. This intelligent regret. And that's key. Intelligent regret. I mean, it's just so purifying because it's wisdom. It's not regret I'm a bad person. It's regret recognizing that's not how I want to be. That's not helping me. That's not the way to live. I am gaining insight into the very habits that are undermining the way of being that I want to have. And so wisdom, it's wisdom. It's not terrible. It's a regret that shines a light of wisdom. And it's like, I don't want to do that. And then I'm going to, do my best to avoid that. And so there's the 4 opponent powers of purification. They take you through that process. And that's what we recommend you do every evening if you can. So that's a full practice. Morning, good motivation, intention setting, recognizing the rare and precious human birth. This day's only coming once. Don't know how many I have. Let's do it well. Let's train my mind. Some shamatha. Let's set the intention to be mindful, be virtuous today. Check in the evening. Dedicate all the good, purify the negativities. Rich practice, day by day, day by day, day by day. That is a complete practice. And then that's something His Holiness would say, day to day, you are cultivating liberation, day by day. And then if there's a particular topic, you set that intention morning, like, a verse or something that you want to work on. Sound okay?
Sounds like a lot.
It's very little. Easy peasy. Come on. Half hour in the morning. Okay. 40 minutes in the morning. A little mindfulness during the day. A little dedication. You need what? That's about an hour. The key is to maintain it throughout the day, though. Maybe a little reading in between. Hang out at the little Dharma cafe where you can sit around sipping lattes, talking about Dharma with everybody. Yeah, that's what we need, a little Dharma cafe. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but it's just unrules. All right, well, let's go ahead and dedicate the merit and wisdom that we have cultivated today, which quite a bit, I imagine. Sorry, let me share the screen with everyone. Sometimes I forget to share the screen, I just look at it. What a gift it is to have come together to engage with these teachings that have been passed down through centuries, these teachings that have been refined, practiced, utilized, translated, transmitted through the efforts of so many. And the conditions have ripened for us to have access to these teachings on the path of liberation, to be a benefit to all beings. Of all the things that we could have been doing on a Wednesday evening, we have chosen to use our time here to cultivate our hearts and our minds in ways that are productive, meaningful, cut through suffering, and help us access our deeper knowing, our Buddha nature, so we can be of greater benefit to all. And with this in mind, let us dedicate any and all merit that we have cultivated for the benefit of all beings, that they may be free of suffering, and for our own continued spiritual growth. Let us dedicate. By this merit, may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Om Tare Tu Tare.